I'll never use a public restroom again. There I was, waiting in line for the ladies' room for probably the millionth time in my life. The rumblings of conversation from around me tickling my ears and begging me to listen in. Women of all shapes, sizes, and walks of life surrounding me in a malformed cocoon of social anxiety. I nervously fiddled with the bottom of my band tee, trying not to look anyone in the eye. Pairs of shoes stared up at me, judging my introverted nature. A woman in a biker jacket and tattered skirt that just barely kissed the bottom of her ass cheeks shuffled backward into me, causing my gaze to shift upward as I rambled an apology for existing behind her. Her piercing aquamarine eyes, sharpened by eyeliner wings, gave a quick flash of something like disgust before averting themselves and focusing back on her friend. That's when I saw it. The room was empty of life. From where I was standing, I could see its walls were painted a dull hospital green, the floors lined with bright white linoleum that hadn't appeared to have seen the trotting of feet ever in its life, and stalls. Dozens and dozens of stalls cut off like cubicles so that if one were to sit, you might see their head poking up above the sanitized walls. But it was a bathroom, it had to be, and I was already shifting in place, trying my best to hold on to control of my bladder, and I was losing it quickly. I pondered a moment on whether or not it was worth going in. Why hadn't anyone else? Maybe it wasn't open. Maybe it was a men's room. My bladder protested. Who cares? Do you want to piss yourself in front of all of these people? Walk back to the party covered in urine? No, I really didn't. So I squeezed out of line and gently prodded the door open further. The motion-sensing lights kicked on, and I could see that it was definitely a restroom. There were sinks lining the wall facing the cubicles. A giant window peered over the room with its beige curtains shut tight like it didn't want to be caught peeking. I weaved my way through the cubicles, trying to find the one farthest from sight in case someone else wandered in. The toilets themselves were odd. Not really toilets, but more of a bench that several people could sit on with holes perforating the gentle slope to the drain. Weird. But the steadily increasing pressure in my bladder begged me not to think too hard on it. As I closed in on the very corner stall, I was greeted by the sounds of the conversation taking place outside and the line bursting into the room. They must have seen me walk in and decided to investigate themselves rather than wait eons for the other restroom to open up. The ladies spread out like a swarm of flies looking for a place to land, and the stalls quickly filled up, including the one I was planning on using. So much for that idea, I thought. The biker girl and her friend took the spot I had set out for, and before I knew it, every single stall was full. The benches were shared by 2 to 3 women, engaging in conversation, like it was completely normal to do so while you used the bathroom with your friends. I looked around for an open spot. It was hopeless. I didn't know any of these women, and despite being on the verge of wetting myself, I wasn't about to mix my pee with the strangers. As I weaved in and out of cubicles to get to the door, keeping my head down and avoiding eye contact at all costs, a loud mechanical clunking caught my attention. The curtains to the large window were opening, sliding back into the walls like a second eyelid. What laid beyond them was not the dreary dark cityscape that waited outside the building, but what could only be described as the most brilliantly blinding light known to man. As the eye of the window opened, I looked around to see everyone had turned their heads to gaze into it, their expressions once vibrant with laughter and conversation, now drooping and void of any life. I waved my hand in front of the girl closest to me. No response. Not even a blink. I had the feeling that if I turned and gave that light a longer gaze, that it would swallow me whole and I would be transformed into a mindless husk like everyone else there. So instead, I looked around, unsure of what to do. I was terrified. I couldn't leave them like this, but what was this? How could I even help? I noticed that beneath every single person there was dark fluid leaking out, like oil seeping out of a leaky engine. The room began to smell. It reminded of the deer carcass in the woods my father and I had stumbled upon once when I was a kid. A thick stench that invaded my nostrils with putrid rot. This only increased my fear. I was no longer worried about having to piss as a warm patch had blossomed in the crotch of my jeans.